Hi, everybody, and welcome to this webinar all around training for your first ultra, brought to you by Threshold Trail Series and Runner. My name's Ed. I'm a member of the team here at Threshold Sports, and I'm really excited to have a couple of special guests on the call who I will introduce momentarily. Do let us know in the chat where you're joining from. Great to see people from around the UK joining already. And let us know if you're signed up to a Threshold event or any other ultra this year that you're taking on. Good to see a couple of people already doing Race to the Stones, Race to the King. So looking forward to helping you guys on your training journey. Today is a webinar. We're going to be talking about training and how to prepare for an ultra, but it's also a Q&A, and we've got some real expertise on the call that you guys can tap into. So if you do have questions about training and preparing for ultra running, pop them in the chat and we will try and answer as many of those as we go. Any that we don't get around to answering, we will address at the end of the call. Harry from the Threshold team is also on the call, so if you've got questions about the events that he might be able to help with, do feel free to drop those in the chat as well. But mostly we're going to be focusing on training today. So I'm just going to introduce myself and our special guests. As I said, my name's Ed. I'm a member of the team at Threshold, and I am an ultra runner myself, so I do know a little bit about training, but not as much as these guys. Sam Charlton is a member of the team at Runna. He's also an experienced coach and has in the past represented Great Britain, no less, at the junior level. And we did just check before the call. Sam is still, I believe, the record holder in the 10K for the junior men's. What was that time, Sam, that you ran?
So that was 29:17, back in 2021, I believe. But yeah, very, very relieved to find out that I'm still number one after checking, because that could have been a pretty upsetting if I found out just before the call.
Yeah, 29:17. That's a 10K time, everyone, not a 5K time. Pretty impressive stuff. And we also have Lydia Oldham on the call. Lydia may be familiar to those of you who've taken part in Threshold events before. Lydia's an ultra runner, content creator based over in Portugal. And I believe you've run both Race to the Stones and King in the past, Lydia. Is that right?
I have. I've done Stones twice for the 100K, and then Kings attempted the 100K, but that was my first one I did, and I DNF'd.
There is no shame in a DNF. And I believe you're toying with the idea of potentially coming back this year for retribution.
I am indeed.
Great to have you both on the call. As I said, Lydia and Sam, between them, know a huge amount about training, both for ultras and for running in general. So do ask any questions you have as we go through in the chat. A bit about what we're going to be discussing today. So we're going to start by just laying some context for where you might be in terms of starting your journey towards your first ultramarathon. We're then going to talk about structure and how to structure your training, both on a sort of micro level, day by day, and also on a weekly level. We're going to talk about 3 key runs that you should really look to integrate into your training. And then we're going to talk a bit about cross-training and strength work, which can be really, really beneficial for running in general, but definitely for ultra running. We're going to touch on training your stomach and nutrition. We are considering doing a webinar entirely on this subject later on in the year. So we won't dive into things like diet and how it might relate to exercise, because that's not the purpose of this. But we will talk a bit about running nutrition during the race and how to manage it well, because it is a really big part of success in ultramarathons. And then we will, as I say, end on that Q&A where we will have an open discussion about everything. So before we dive into this, just want to flag that our training plans, which have been produced in partnership with Runner, are available now. They're on the website. You can scan the QR code on your screen and it'll take you straight there. Or you can head to the participant hub and click on training plans. We have training plans for both 50K and 100K distances, and they come in beginner, intermediate, and advanced plans. And I'll talk a bit about what those terms mean a bit later on. There also are some walker plans, which Claire Maxted, otherwise known as Wild Ginger Running on YouTube, has put together for us. So if you are a walker and our events are walker friendly, then you can look at those and they will help you get to that finish line. However, our training plans are obviously static documents. They are PDF files. So if you want something that's a little bit more dynamic, then we can definitely recommend the Runner app. Runner are the official training partner of the Threshold Trail Series. And their app is a much more dynamic way of structuring your training, because ultimately it's going to respond to you and your life and the fact that sometimes, we do miss sessions, things get in the way, life happens. Sam, as a member of the Runner team, I should say, do you want to just say a little bit about what the app is, how it works, and what people can expect if they download it?
Yeah, of course. So we are the #1 rated personalized training app on the App Store. And yeah, we have a whole host of different training plans, all the way from 5K up to the ultra distances, as we spoke about there. As for the ultra distances, we have a 50K plan, a 100K plan, and then a 110K 2-day staged plan, and then a 220K 5-day stage plan. So we do have some varied plans going on there. And they will work towards your race and your distance that you're training towards. If you're kind of training for a race that's sort of in between those distances, at the moment we don't have the flexibility to change to the precise distance as of yet. That is coming in the future. But yeah, if for example you had a 60K plan, we'd probably recommend that you use the 50K plan. And if you had, I don't know, a 90K plan, would suggest that you trained with the 100K plans. Basically just something like that. So yeah, and again we've got all different sort of running abilities. You just input all your data into the flow as you're setting up the plan, and then yeah, it'll create something personalized towards what you're after. So yeah.
Yeah, nice one. And you can get a 2-week free trial of Runner. Oh, excuse me, skipped right ahead there. If you use the code threshold. So if you want to test out the app and see if it's right for you, then use that code and it will unlock 2 weeks free. So, oh, I've gone back way too far. Apologies. Let's talk a bit about what we're training for. So the graph here on the left is really an attempt to illustrate the breadth of what ultramarathons encompass. So you can see the different distances that you might typically train for there on the left: 5K, 10K, half marathon, and marathon. And then the two bars on the right are both, technically speaking, ultramarathons. Obviously, anything over a marathon counts as an ultramarathon. But as that graph kind of visually shows you, there's huge variability in what an ultra means. So from 50 to 100K is obviously a big leap. And obviously there are races that go even further than that. So I guess the important thing to stress here before we dive into the details of how you might be training is that it's really important to prepare for the specific race you're taking on. There's no use just training for a generic ultra. You should be training for the distance you're doing. With that in mind, Lydia, you've done a few ultras in your time. Broadly speaking, what would you say are kind of the main differences if you're preparing for a trail ultra versus, let's say, a conventional race that someone might be used to, like a road half marathon, something like that?
Yeah, it's definitely the terrain. I think it's also kind of hard if you live in a city, because I was living in London when I was training for these, and trying to find that sort of terrain can be quite difficult. There was a lot of going out on the trains to try and find a bit, or finding tiny parks and doing a lot of loops. But yeah, trying to find that terrain, trying to get in hills, trying to understand what the difference is going to be, and yeah, understanding like your shoes, what you're going to wear, is so different than when you're going to do a road race.
Yeah, it's a lot to wrap your head around, particularly if you're taking it on for the first time. Sam, when you're working with athletes, regardless of the distance they're doing, how important do you think that specificity is when you're putting together a training plan?
Massively important. I mean, from individual to individual, it can vary so much as to what your training is going to look like. Everyone's got their strengths, everyone's got their weaknesses, and you've got to pinpoint those weaknesses that you want to improve. And yeah, just getting that structure to your training, just to really build and keep that consistency. That's the key word that I always use with any athlete, is consistency. And yeah, if you can stick to a plan that is specifically built towards what you're training for, yeah, it's gonna help you massively.
Yeah, massively. I'm just going to quickly switch my light on because I think I look like a ghost and I'm not happy with it. Okay, bear with me.
I actually just saw a question about training hills when you live in a flat area. And what I used to do was, if I couldn't go out somewhere, I would get on the stair stepper. I know it's absolutely diabolical and like it's so boring sometimes, but if you live somewhere really flat and you just don't have the access, then I think sort of working in what you can when you can, and especially if you like work in an office and there's a gym nearby, I just get on that stair stepper and get in some or even an incline on a treadmill just to try and get that in. Really helps.
Yeah, Absolutely. I think, and that's another part of Alice's question. We're getting a bit ahead of ourselves, but another part of Alice's question was around training for the downhill, which Alice, I think when we get on to talking about cross training, there might be some insights in there in terms of building strength, which is really useful for downhill running. Um, let's zoom out a bit then and talk a bit about starting your journey. So as I mentioned, we've got plans for 50K and 100K, beginner, intermediate, and advanced. And the way we define those is not by your pace or your ability, your speed, but by your experience. So we have runners who come and do our 100K and they do it in 8 hours, and we have runners who come and take 20 or more. And we really wouldn't differentiate between those runners in terms of whether they're beginner or advanced so much as what they're coming to that race with. So if you look on the left of your screen, you'll see the beginner plan for the 50K defines that as you're used to exercising, not necessarily running, but exercising, and that could include walking 3 to 4 times a week, and that you've done a 10K run in the past. Now that might seem like quite a surprisingly low bar for taking on a 50K, but we see every year, time and time again, people who meet that threshold come along and they finish the race, no problem. All the way through to the other side of things, the advanced runner, for the 100K, we define that as being used to running, not just exercising, but running 4 to 5 times a week, and that you've done at least one ultra in the past. So when you're looking at this spectrum, just have a think about where you might sit on that in terms of what plan might be right for you. But that's the foundation that we kind of lay when we talk about coming to an ultra. Obviously, if you use an app like the Runner app, then you're going to have an even more dynamic sort of definition of where you're coming from. So let's talk about structuring your training then. So here's a screenshot from one of our training plans. You can see that it's laid out in a nice neat grid, and week on week, the days remain fairly consistent. So there's a sort of steady routine that you'll be working to. Sam, you touched on consistency there, and routine, I guess, is a big part of that. How important would you say routine is when you're prepping for a big race?
Yeah, routine is it's huge. It's almost everything really. I think you've got to have it. It's one of those where if you go week by week without that routine, you can just get lost with your training. You need to have a set structure. And it also, I think a key word that comes with routine is accountability as well. If you've got that accountability there, it means you can't miss runs. You know what you've got to do week by week. If you know you've got an easy run to do on a Monday, that's what you've kind of got to get. You've got to get out the door. There's no slacking really if you've got a training plan that's telling you what to do. So yeah, no, I think routines it's huge, and yeah, that accountability word I think is the key one that fits alongside it really.
Yeah, I guess the flip side of that, Lydia, is as important as routine can be, it's not legally binding, as it says there. Like you shouldn't necessarily beat yourself up too much for missing the odd run here or there, right?
Yeah, no, exactly. I'm someone that doesn't like having too much formality to my runs. I'm definitely one of those trail runners that likes to take some snacks and go out and just run. So I sort of have a plan in place, know how many miles I sort of need that week, but I will sort of switch and interchange those days when I need to. So I don't have that stress of, oh, I've got a really busy day today and I haven't fit in, I was supposed to do that today. I know that it's okay that once in a while I switch those days around, and that's completely fine. As long as you still have that overall structure, if you have stressful days with work and things, you can, shift it a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, another thing that might stick out on this plan is the amount of rest that is built into it, especially at the early parts of the training plan. Sam, when you're training for a big race and you're hitting the kind of speeds you're hitting, rest can be something that's maybe difficult to do psychologically, but physically has huge benefits, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I think especially when you're getting into good shape and you can sense the fitness is improving and stuff like that. It's very easy to get carried away and want to kind of keep going and just day by day just run all the time sort of thing. But yeah, the rest is so important because yeah, eventually you'll get to a point in your training that the initial block of maybe the first 4 weeks you can probably breeze through that feeling okay with maybe a little rest and stuff. But then it's once you start hitting that really key part of the training where you'll feel it if you haven't sort of been focusing on the recovery. So yeah, those rest days are important, and you might as well enjoy them as well.
Yeah, find something else to do to put your feet up. as well as the day-by-day routine that's kind of built into these training plans, and any good training plan will do that, there's also this week-by-week kind of progression, this build, which is illustrated here on this graph. So you can see the white weeks are where you're building sort of by 10% or so a week. On the green weeks, those are these cutback weeks. These are built into the plan. These are times when you deliberately cut back your mileage to kind of help yourself recover, kind of the equivalent of a rest day, kind of a rest week. And then at the end of the graph, there's these orange weeks, these taper weeks. Lydia, tapering can be quite a tricky thing to get right. Obviously, at this stage, we're kind of quite a long way away from even thinking about tapering. But when people do get there, what are some signs to look out for that you're doing a decent job of tapering?
I mean, for me, it's probably going a bit mentally insane because I think you've gone from doing all this work and running, and you know that you need to rest, but mentally you're like, I want to be on that race. I want to be like, I think sometimes you can get caught up in thinking, oh, I can get these extra miles in now. And, like sort of, oh, I'll get this in. And you're like, that's really not what you should be doing. Really take in that rest because you want to feel like you are like ready to go at that start line. So I think tapering is one of the hardest things to do because you're just so ready to go and do the race.
Yeah, it's almost like if you're feeling a bit uncomfortable and a bit twitchy, you're probably doing a good job of tapering, right?
Yeah, definitely.
We had some questions come in advance around weekly distances and what to kind of aim for. Obviously, it's a tricky thing to answer because it does depend massively upon the context that you're bringing to it, and your own training and racing background. But if you look at the plans that we've got available, from the beginner to the advanced, there's quite a lot of variety in terms of the peaks they reach. So I would say to Caitlin, who submitted this question, if you have a think about where you might sit on that spectrum of what the plans outline and take a look at the kind of distances they hit week on week, that might give you a sense of what to aim for. But obviously, as we say, not legally binding. Another question that came in kind of on the subject of a taper as well, but quite late in a taper. Ben says, what do you do for the 3 days leading up to race day? That's very, very granular. But Lydia, 3 days before a race, what's going through your head? What are you doing?
3 days beforehand, I am probably going through everything that I'm going to take with me. I probably choose my outfit as well. I've probably trained in like a couple different outfits and decided which one I think is going to be best for the day. Have like a rain option, make sure nothing rubs, everything sits right, you feel comfortable in it. Picked up my shoes and my socks and put it all laid out, ready to go. I've also got all of my food, just anything that I might need on that day. And then I carb load as well, but I guess I don't like take on loads of carbs. The 3 days before, I probably just switch out a bit of protein for more carbs in my diet instead of like taking on like just like eating loads of carbs. I think when I first started running, I was like, I've just got to eat as many carbs as possible. And then I was like, I feel so terrible when I'm running. And I actually just found that if I switch out a bit of protein, have more carbs the week before, I'm actually way better. So that's probably what I'm doing right beforehand.
Yeah, I hope that helped answer your question, Ben. Diane's asking about strength training, which we will get to, Diane. We're just at the moment just focusing on the running. One last question here from Nicola, who said, struggling to pace myself. Will 17 weeks of training be enough for my first ultra? Obviously, it's hard to say because, again, it depends on where you're coming from. But all of our plans are 16 weeks long. So hopefully I would say 17 weeks is probably enough time, Nicola. Let's talk about the types of running then that go into this training plan. So you can see we've got some orange, some purple, some red. There's different colors on this plan. Those will reflect kind of different paces that you should be aiming for. And this next slide will kind of dive into a bit of detail around those. So the first of these is music to everyone's ears, easy runs. These are really the bread and butter of your training. They make up anything up to 80, 90% even of your training. Sam, when you're coaching an athlete or you're sort of training yourself, what's kind of your definition of an easy run? How do you measure that?
Yeah, so with Runner, we tend to use like a conversational pace. So it should be a pace that when you're going out with your friends, you should be able to quite comfortably kind of hold a conversation. And yeah, that's generally the rule of thumb that we tend to go with. But yeah, you kind of just want to be heading out the door. Sometimes you don't want to necessarily put any specific pace on it, maybe no set no targets kind of thing. And yeah, just kind of head out the door, enjoy the run, just sort of, yeah, if you're out with friends, just go for a chat. And yeah, don't kind of put too much expectation on it really. Just feel comfortable as you're going.
If people are looking to get some data to it, do you have like heart rate recommendations or anything like that that you could maybe put to it, or is it better to go by feel, do you think?
Yeah, I mean it kind of varies from like person to person. Obviously, if I put a kind of specific heart rate on it, it might not be precise to the individual. But yeah, with heart rate, the only thing that I'm not always keen on is the kind of watches, the heart rate straps. They're not always like 100% accurate, and then also without kind of doing a VO2 max test in the labs with the scientists and stuff like that, you're not going to kind of have the specific metrics that you as an individual need to work to, because everyone can vary so much depending on like sort of resting low and high heart rates and stuff like that. It can vary so much. So yeah, from my point of view, I prefer just to kind of go to RPE, sort of relative perceived effort. And yeah, kind of just run to field just to kind of enjoy it, maybe run a bit more comfortably. But yeah, if you are kind of interested in working to heart rate a bit more, sort of working in that zone two, that's the kind of the popular word that goes around at the moment. Yeah, you probably are kind of trying to get a bit more of a scientific background so that you know exactly what heart rate zone that you kind of you should be working at. So yeah.
Yeah, Lydia, with easy runs, do you put a pace to yours, or do you think there's too many variables in terms of, elevation, how you're even feeling day to day? Your pace can vary, right?
Yeah, it definitely varies. My pace living in London for an easy run is very different than here. Here, I live on a lot of hills. Like just going out, my 5K is easily 300 to 500 meters elevation. So on a long run, it's humbled my pace a lot being here
Yeah.
and just keeping it really easy. But I'm someone that really likes that conversational pace. I know when I'm out on an easy run, I usually like doing it with people and just chatting the whole way. So I sort of know that if I'm huffing and puffing, then I'm not going easy enough.
Yeah, and I would say, oh, sorry, go on, Sam.
Yeah, I was going to say the thing to add, just going back to if you did kind of want a specific pace, um, with the runner training plans, what we have is when you put your estimated current race time into the plan, what our algorithm basically has kind of metrics on what the different paces will look like depending on what speed you're going. So yeah, so for example, if you had a I don't know, let's say a 2 hour half marathon time, our algorithm will work based on that exact time and set you target paces for your easy run if that's how you want to train. So yeah, you would still get that on a runner training plan too.
Yeah, absolutely. It's obviously pace is influenced heavily by elevation, but on a flat track, it's a good metric. I was just going to say that the thing that people often really get hung up on, and we'll talk about this in a moment with ultra training, is the long run. But I think that actually, if you can nail what your easy pace looks like and really be honest with yourself about what easy means, which is not easy to do, sometimes it does humble you a bit. That's going to unlock a huge amount of potential for your ultra because that's where you're going to be doing the most aerobic work. So we are going to talk about two other key runs, but don't neglect easy running. It really makes a huge difference. Having said that, let's talk about a second type, which is the workout. So a lot of people will neglect speed work when they're training for an ultra because they might make the assumption, this is a long race, this is a slow race, this is a long day of jogging. I don't need to do any speed work. But actually, it offers a lot of benefits, Sam, outside of just pure aerobic speed, right? It really helps in all kinds of ways for endurance.
No, absolutely. The key thing for anyone that I'm coaching where they are kind of doing those endurance races, um, what interval sessions and workouts are like will give you is it sort of increases your high end speed. So if you can increase that high end speed, your window to be able to improve your general speed with adding endurance training into it, that's going to improve alongside. So yeah, if you can work on those interval sessions, really work on your speed work, increase that high end speed, your race pace will eventually improve with it. So yeah, like that's the really key part of this sort of interval workouts if you are still training for an ultra.
Yeah, absolutely. Important to say you don't want to be doing these all the time. One a week is fine. If you are a more experienced runner, maybe you could look at doing two, but these are really those special sessions that you pepper into your week. Lydia, do you find yourself doing much in the way of workouts, living out in the hills of Portugal?
I usually do a track workout or a speed workout once every 2 weeks. And sometimes it will vary. At the moment, training for something that is really long, it definitely takes a little bit more of a backseat. But when I was training for Threshold, it was once a week that I was trying to get that in there. But I think I've learned through the ways that I run that I like running in the trails more. So I would rather do an easy run and then do my workout as more of a bit of a more randomized workout in the hills. And that's how I sort of take on my workouts now. And I sort of learned that through doing a lot of track sessions and being like, I don't like this, but I have to do it. And then realizing you don't actually have to go to the track. You can do different style workouts and you can find those workouts that sort of work for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think finding the one that works for you is absolutely right. And once you get into workouts, they can be the most rewarding aspect of your running as well. So do experiment with speed as part of your training. So the last key run that we're going to talk about, and by far and away the topic that we got the most questions on in advance, is the long run. A lot of people asking, what distance should your longest long run be? And I just wanted to caveat any answers we give with the fact that if you stack up all the running you're going to be doing over the 16 weeks of your training, and you add all that mileage up, and then you take that final long run and you sort of work out as a percentage how much of your training is that long run, it's going to be 1 or 2%. It's a very small amount. So as crucial as it might feel, don't get too hung up on it, because you're focusing on 2% of your training at the expense of the other 98%. So a lot of people asking about that. So I just wanted to make that clear. However, Lydia, when you're preparing for a 100K event, let's say, what are you sort of looking to reach in those long runs to get yourself psychologically sort of confident that you'll take the race on?
Yeah, I guess long runs can look a little different from time to time. I think sometimes either I don't have the time to get that one long run in, or it sometimes can be a bit daunting to get it in. I sometimes split them up, have it in the same day. Sometimes when I'm training for stuff and I need to fit it in the week and I know I don't have time on the weekend, I will run a big workout in an easy run in the morning and then do one in the afternoon as well. And that just gives me a little bit extra time to rest as well. Still feel like I've got that long run in and I've done a big amount of training. So sometimes it'll be like a 25K in the morning and then a 20K in the evening, if I really need to get those miles in the big weeks. But I do really like a long run. So I do like getting big ones in. I'd probably say like the biggest ones that I'm getting in are like a 50K when I'm training for something longer than 100. But I guess when I'm training for something in the hundreds, then it would be more like a 40K, a marathon. I would never go over a 50K when I'm training for 100.
Yeah, I think as trail runners, we love the long run. It's what we live for. And it can be tempting to just cram all that mileage in and do half your weekly mileage on a Sunday. But I would say, I mean, I did my first 100-mile race a couple of years ago, and my longest long run in the build up to that was, I think, 35K, and I was fine. Obviously, I'd done longer races before, but in the actual training block, that was the longest I did, and it got me through it fine. I think really the biggest benefit of doing a big long run, maybe 3-4 weeks out, is it's more around that kind of race management piece, practicing your nutrition, practicing your hydration, getting yourself in the mindset of what it actually feels like to be out there for 4 or 5 hours. physiologically, I mean, not a huge benefit going beyond. Generally, the wisdom seems to be 3 hours, right? I mean, Sam, you're training for different kind of races, but when you're coaching athletes, where do you put the long run in terms of the benefits that it gives people?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the endurance that you get out of it, it is massive. But the way that, especially for training for those longer distances, I think the key thing that you kind of got to think about is, if you, for example, if we take a 16 week block, the amount of miles that you do in that amount of time, that's what we're building you up to for the race. You've got to add them all together and look at what that is as a total. So if you've trained, I don't know, 750 miles in those 16 weeks or something like that, then you're more than prepared. You've got your body to tolerate that load, and that, yeah, that's the kind of the key way that you kind of got to look at it. Because yeah, it's not always going to be possible to go and do a 60-70K long run on a Sunday. It's too time consuming. So yeah, and that might not necessarily be what anyone would recommend either. But yeah, if you can get your body to tolerate the miles week by week, you'll be absolutely fine come race day.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you put it like that, 750 miles, getting hung up on a 20-mile run, it's not worth the stress.
Exactly.
I also think with that as well, like if you know that you're really going to push yourself in that, like try and do a 60K, and then you know that Monday, Tuesday, you're not going to be able to get your workouts in because you're so exhausted and you have work and things like that. It's almost less beneficial trying to push on and get those extra miles in, when you know you could get 2 great workouts in on Monday and Tuesday if you just did 10K less.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Fatigue management is a massive part of it all, isn't it?
Yeah.
So hopefully that's helped people. Sorry, Lydia, were you about to say something?
Nope, that's it.
All good. Sorry, thought I interrupted you. Hopefully that's helped address some of those key runs. Let's talk a little bit about trail versus road running, because a few people asked questions around this, and I think it's a really interesting topic. So Caroline said, how do I get faster on the trails? I'm fairly good on the roads, but put me on a trail and I'm right back to chasing cutoffs. Do I need to build strength? And if so, how? And similarly, Afifa asked, how many trail runs should you do during training? Should they be longer than the others? So, I mean, Lydia, this is really topical for you, given that you used to live in London training for trail races. In terms of that balance, I mean, first of all, you can absolutely get fitter training on the roads for a trail race, right?
Yeah, I think so. For my first one, Race to the Kings that I did, I had hardly ever done any trail running at all. I'd only done road races. I'd never done a trail race, and I think the only thing that I didn't plan very well for my first one. I was just like, I want to do it, and then obviously I've learned a lot more since then. But I didn't look into the elevation, and I think that's something that I really wish going back I'd have been like, look at the elevation, look at what's going on. I think that's the only thing that I really didn't understand about trail racing. The terrain and I think the beauty that you get from trail racing is so nice. Being out in nature, which is something you don't really get in a road race. So I think that's something that really keeps your mind quite peaceful, or it does for me anyways. Being able to look at the calming nature around, and just sort of enjoying that. But yeah, strength training definitely helps when it comes to, and also I think it's that doing like one leg mobility, like ankle stabilization, all of that, because the ground that you're on is just that little bit more not even. So just having that ability to have that strength, have that stability, is really good. That sort of answers the question.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Sam, I guess it's a bit like the difference between road and cross country, right? Like, how do you navigate that change in terrain and making sure that you're getting the specificity in whilst maintaining that build?
Yeah, no, I mean, from my perspective, I feel like yes, in an ideal world, if you can get out on the trails or wherever it may be, then yeah, that is the more ideal thing for your training if that's what you do in a trail race. But yeah, I wouldn't get too hung up on it either if you don't have access to that, like easy access or anything. But yeah, if you can get that balance where even if it's just once a week, because I know for me when I do my cross country training, I'll be running 6 days a week, but only one of them will be a grass session where I'm sort of on the grass and on the mud and stuff like that. So so yeah, as long as you kind of have one sort of session per week where you're getting that stimulus that you're going to get on race day, then for me, I feel like that's enough. But yeah, I also wouldn't get too hung up on it if it is difficult to have access if you're living in cities and stuff like that. So yeah, that's what I would kind of say on that point.
Yeah, and I would say like some of the best trail runners in the world are doing, as Sam said, most of their training on the road, and that's just because it's a more controllable environment, and you can really manage, your effort and your pace and get the best training stimulus. It may not be as fun as going out on the trails, and if you can and you enjoy that, then that's great. But I wouldn't get too hung up on it. I say this as a Londoner, so maybe I'm a little bit biased, but spend a lot of time on the roads. Cool. Let's talk a bit about strength work then, given that we just touched upon that. Cross training, strength work, all really, really important. I think the thing to say, as it says on the slide here, some is better than none. Don't get too hung up on, I've got to do this many gym sessions, I've got to do this many cycles. It's more about what you can do and working with the resources that you have. Lydia, we had a question in advance from Ross who said, how much strength and core training do you do, and can you do it on the same day that you run?
I am someone that doesn't like the gym, but will force myself to do strength training because when I weigh up, I'm like, oh, I could have this hour to run, or oh, I could have this hour to strength train. Obviously, my mind wants to go to running, but I do know that having that strength training is really, really important, especially if you're going to be out on the trails and things like that. So I try and get in at least one strength training a week. And in a perfect week, it would be two, but it's usually an imperfect week and it's one. Even if it's sometimes just doing things in my house, if I can't get to the gym for that second session, if it's just like some stabilization or just little things that I can do in the house without having to feel like, oh, I need to go to the gym, I need to get that strength training in. So that's sort of what I try and do on strength training. And then cross training, I'll do one session a week. And sometimes it's actually instead of a run. If I feel like my legs feel really tired, I'll go on the cross trainer and just cross train away. I wish I could say I could go for a cycle, but I don't have a bike here yet in Portugal. So I would love to go out and have a cycle, but yeah, just get on that cross trainer and go for a little bit. So sometimes it's not as well as a run. It's instead of a run if I feel like my body needs that.
Yeah, Sam, a really good question here from Alice. I was wondering if you have any advice. She says, do you recommend for runners lighter weights and more reps, or heavier with less reps? Do you have a sense of what might be beneficial?
Yeah, I think it completely depends on kind of the athlete that I'll be working with. So for the maybe the more speed events, if I'm looking at an 800 or a 1500 track athlete, I'd probably be saying that you go for the higher weights and the lower reps. You want to be sort of working on that real sort of high end strength. But for the endurance events and stuff, when I'm training for 5Ks and 10Ks, and then anyone that's kind of doing marathons and above, yeah, definitely the lower weights and the higher reps. You kind of want to work on just that injury prevention. I think that's the main thing. And yeah, putting them big weights on, maybe on as necessary. It's more about building that endurance and stuff in your muscles when you're doing your strength training. So yeah, for me, I don't think as an ultra runner or anything like that you would need to be kind of putting the big weights on or anything. So yeah.
Yeah, it's an interesting one to strike the balance on. Stephen has asked, what strength training do you recommend, particularly for legs? Obviously, Stephen, it does depend upon the resources that you have, but you can't go wrong if you have a PT or someone who knows what they're doing show you. You can't go wrong with dumbbells, kettlebells, and standard bars in the gym as well. Just free weights, because that will really help you sort of get that mobility as well. It's worth saying that, most people don't finish 100K out of breath, but a lot of people finish 100K with pretty broken legs. So make sure that you do your strength training if you can, because if you've got strong legs, it's really going to help you get to that finish line. Lastly, before we get to the general Q&A, we'll just touch on your stomach and training it, because it is something that can go wrong for a lot of people in an ultra, and it really can be make or break. We work with some really great nutrition partners at Threshold. We've got High Five and Perkia. both of these guys, all their products are available for free on the race. So if you're training with these products, you will know that they will be available on the race. So High Five make a range of gels and electrolyte drinks and things like that. And Perkia make these cereal bars, which you might not want in a half marathon, but on an ultra, it's good to have some real food in your stomach as well. So if you head to the website, you can find discount codes for both of these guys. Lydia, when you're taking on an ultra, how important is nutrition? How do you approach it? What's going through your mind with food?
Yeah, I mean, it's so important. When I first started running, I didn't think I needed gels. And very quickly learned that you do need gels and food, and you can't go very far without them. But I guess it depends on the sort of distance and how I train for it, depending on what I have. When I have over 100k sort of distances, I have real food. So I always have like sandwiches and things like that. And with 100ks, I will have sort of like solid bars, sort of like these. And then I will interchange that with some gels as well. I can't do 100k just on gels. I feel very sick by the end. I have to have some real food, but it's taken me a while to train myself to be able to do that. And that's usually going out on those easy runs and having fuel probably more than you think you need it. So I usually do it by about 30 minutes, every 30 minutes on an easy run. I won't have a full solid bar, but I'll just keep snacking on it. And slowly through time, my stomach's just become fine with that. So now I can take on any food whenever I need. But then saying that, sometimes you just have a bad race. And I've had races where 10k in, I've just stopped being able to take in fuel and been sick. But that's usually because I haven't planned something right, or, you know, not fueled early enough. I think sometimes you get caught up in the race and you don't fuel soon enough. And then if you deplete yourself to the point of being on almost zero, you just can't come back from that. So I've definitely learned, take it on before you think you want it. As soon as your body's like, I need it, it's too late. And sometimes you can't come back from that. So yeah, definitely fuel before you think you need to.
Yeah, your stomach is an energy, uses energy itself, and it's really worth noting that your stomach uses, it's a bit gross, but your stomach uses a lot of blood to digest food. So if you've not trained it, then all that blood going to your stomach will cause issues. So do practice, and as Lydia said, it's hugely personal. I used to get stomach issues on every long run, and I've now conditioned myself. I mean, I did a 100-mile race last year, and it took me just under 24 hours, and I had 45 gels in that race, and I was fine. And it's massively personal, but some people wouldn't even have one, you know. So it really does depend upon what works for you. Someone in the chat whose name, unfortunately, I don't know because it's just their surname, MacArthur, says, how much do I need to actively think about salt and electrolytes? I guess that really depends upon the environmental conditions, right, Lydia? I guess if it's a really hot race, potentially more of a consideration.
Yeah, definitely depends. Earlier this year, I did a desert race, and that was taking on salt like constantly because it's just coming out of you. And you know, if you're in England and it might be a bit colder, especially if you're training now in these sort of really cold months, I can sometimes completely forget about water. I'm having to sort of like have a reminder on my watch to be like, just drink a bit, like have something, because you still need it. You are still sweating, but if it's cold, you just completely forget. But you don't need it as much with the salts. But I tend to, during a race, have one water bottle that's got an electrolyte tablet in it and one that's just water, so I can sort of change and have one when I need it, and then when you get to an aid station you can fill up accordingly. And that sort of is a nice way not to have to take in electrolytes or have to take in water. You can sort of choose when you want to.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's sort of how I go about it.
Yeah, you want to little and often is the advice. James says I can't take gels, but I've worked out that beetroots work well for me. Hard to carry. That is a new one. I've not heard of people lugging around some beetroots in an ultra, but more power to you. Daniel says, can you overdo electrolytes and what might be some symptoms? I'm not sure about overdoing electrolytes. I wouldn't know, but I do know that you can overdo water and you should really be careful about that. Obviously, drink to thirst, I think, is the general advice, right? But you do see people crossing finish lines with call it kind of the lean. Sometimes you see people who are leaning very hard to one side, and that can be a muscle failure thing. It can just be fatigue, but it can be a more dangerous thing called hyponatremia. So I would just say keep your eye out for that. Don't feel like you have to be drinking water all the time if you're not thirsty. But obviously, if you are thirsty, then you should. Anything else on nutrition? I guess one thing I would say is I don't know if you've done this at all, Lydia, is weighing yourself before and after a run. It can be a bit seem a bit nerdy, but particularly in the height of summer, if you go out for an hour run and you weigh yourself before and after, you can be amazed just how much weight you'll lose in sweat. And some people will lose a lot. I tend to lose about a litre, almost a litre and a half. Some people will lose hardly anything, but that's a really good way of knowing actually how much fluid to take on. So that's a little tip there. I don't know if have you gone to that level of measuring, Lydia, or you just go by intuition?
I haven't sort of noticed, but sometimes I will. If I have hopped on the scale, I'll be like, oh, I seem really light, and it's not.
Yeah.
It's just I sweat a lot. So yeah, I have
Yeah.
noticed that sometimes.
Nice. Right. Well, that's the sort of general subject matter of the webinar covered. As I say, if you do have any questions, do pop them in the chat and we'll try and get round to some of them before the end. How are we for time? Yeah, we've still got sort of 10 minutes or so. So I've got some questions that were submitted in advance that we'll work our way through. The QR codes on your screen will take you to Race to the King and Race to the Stones on the website. So if you have been inspired to sign up, then please do scan those and you can take a look at the races. A question here from Hannah, which I think a lot of people might be having. She's doing the 50K over 2 days option, sorry, 100K over 2 days option at Race to the Stone. So this is where you run 50K on the Saturday, you camp out at the base camp overnight, and then you run another 50K on the Sunday. In terms of training for this, I mean, our general recommendation, I don't know if you agree, guys, would be to train as if you're training for 100K and to treat that as the race that you're training for. And obviously just enjoy the fact that you're going to have a bit of a break in between. Lydia, have you done the 2-day package yet? Have you thought about trying that?
I haven't. I haven't done 2 days, but I have done multi-day ultras before, but not this one. So I can.
Is there any sort of major difference in terms of preparing or training?
I think it's sort of understanding that the next day how to go about that, because you'll have just done this, really long run, and then you're not in your own bed, you don't have your home comforts around you, and then you go on to the next 50K. So it's making sure that you are aware that, you're going to get up in the morning and you want to try and get ready for that next run and be mentally prepared, but also like physically prepared. Try and do some like stretching and just like mentally get ready, even though you're going to be in a really uncomfortable state because it's not the usual way you start a run. So I think it's just getting mentally prepared to be uncomfortable on that second day.
Yeah, I actually but like before coming into this, just while I was preparing, I actually had a little look at our plans, and I mentioned the 110K 2-day plan and then the 100K plan as well. There's not a lot of difference at all between the two. They're fairly similar. The training, the training sessions that are planned, they're very similar. They don't kind of vary too much between the two. But yeah, like Lydia says there, the key thing is literally focusing on the recovery in between the two runs. And yeah, I think you can kind of do that in some ways. If you've got in your training days back to back where you're training, in those evenings, really sort of dial into how you're going to feel on race day, on that evening, and try and sort of train yourself to kind of do what you're going to do on that night, so you're prepared come the event. So yeah.
Yeah, great advice. Sam, a question here that I thought you might have some insight into. So Oliver says, on rest days, do you think not running is good enough, just not running, or are there things you can do in terms of promoting active recovery? What would you recommend on rest days?
Yeah, so for rest days, I think there's a few things. Your sleep, that's an important one, because the recovery that you get from sleep is essential. But yeah, you can do lots of things like recovery work, sort of stretching and foam rolling and stuff like that. And I know something that I've recently took up myself is actually started doing yoga. And yeah, I felt that's massively helped with kind of recovery and sort of keeping muscles and even joints and stuff all loosened up and what have you. So so yeah, you can definitely do active recovery, and it's a huge benefit really. But yeah, there's plenty to focus on, and yeah, hydration, fueling on those recovery days. You've got to keep it going. It doesn't kind of just stop because you're not training. You just got to remember you've got a run the next day that you also need to fuel towards. So so yeah, on those recovery days, apart from the running side, you don't have to change too much else. You can still do other things, go for a walk, stretch the legs and stuff like that. But yeah, like apart from the not running, don't change too much really.
Yeah, I think someone earlier asked, is it fine to cycle into town on a rest day? And I think it depends on what you mean by cycle into town. But if it's just a little spin of the wheels, totally fine. Just don't be grinding up some hill on your rest day. A couple of other questions that came in advance. Severine asked, it'd be good to have a group for participants doing the same distance to keep each other motivated. Severine, I would recommend there's two places you can go. One is our Facebook forum. If you search Threshold Trail Series participants, you'll find a forum for everyone. But then also we have a Halo platform. So Halo is a community platform that we use. It's a bit like WhatsApp, but a bit more private. You don't have to share your personal number or anything. But you can join the group for the race that you're doing, so that you can meet other people and maybe connect with them as well. A couple more questions. Bronwyn, a question that I think we can all relate to. How do you balance training with a busy job? Any thoughts on that, Lydia?
I definitely understand that. I have a 9 to 5 and also train and then also do content. So I feel like I'm working 3 jobs sometimes. And my thing was always, I love the morning. I'm a morning person. I go to bed at like 9 o'clock, so I'm like an old person. But I used to, or I still do. I get up in the morning, and when I had to go into the office in London, now I have work from home, which is quite nice. But I would do my easy runs as my run into the office and take my stuff with my backpack, which is always great for when you're training for an ultra as well. Keeps you nice and slow when you have a heavy backpack on, that's for sure. And I'd also just try and squeeze things in wherever you can. Like 30 minutes strength training on your lunch break is better than no strength training. I know sometimes it's easy to be like, oh, well, I only have 30 minutes, so I'm not going to do it. Those 30 minutes or 20 minutes is more beneficial than not doing it. So it's just sort of managing what you can fit in and when you can fit it in. If it means doing a 5K in the morning and a 5K in the evening, then that's what life has given you. That's what you can do. So I think that's just sort of how you have to plan it, and understanding that not everyone's plan is going to be the same, but as long as you feel like you're getting in and trying your hardest to get there for the race, then I think that's all you can do, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a lovely point to end on. So thank you to everyone for dialing in. If you do have more questions, just drop us an email, the info at Race to the Stones or info at racetotheking.com, and we can get back to you with any more questions you have. We'll share a recording of this webinar as well, so you can revisit it, and do head over to the website for those training plans. I guess lastly, just want to say a massive thank you to Sam and Lydia for joining us. Guys, if people want to follow you and find out more, where can they do so? Where should they head over? Sam, do you want to go first?
Yeah, so my Instagram is Sam Charlton __. So yeah, you can ask me any questions on there.
Nice. And Lydia?
Mine is Come Run With Me, and it's comerunwith.me. So yeah, you can follow me on Instagram on there, and ask me any questions. I'll always answer any questions that people have.
Nice. And hope to see you at one of our events this year, Lydia.
Yes, I'm gonna come back and I'm gonna finish the King. I need to.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone, and see you on race day, if not before. Thank you. Bye.